I'm Lauren Whitfield, 35 years old, and I spent 7 quiet years paying off my parents' mortgage, thinking I was securing something for all of us, a legacy maybe, or just a place to come home to. Then, on my younger sister's wedding day, I stood in a vineyard and watched my mother hand that house key, and all to her new son-in-law, as if I'd never existed. No warning, no thank you, just applause. Later, they tried to take my cabin, too. When I said no, they called the police. That was the moment I understood some families only remember you when you're useful. Before I go any further, drop a comment and let me know where you're listening from, and hit that like button if you've ever been quietly pushed aside by the people you loved most. I grew up just outside Asheville, North Carolina, the older of 2 daughters. Our family didn't have much, but my parents were proud people, the kind who packed your lunch with a handwritten note, who told you to always stand on your own 2 feet. My mom, Marlene, worked part-time at the library before her arthritis got bad. My dad, Walter, used to say hard work was its own reward. I took those lessons seriously, got myself through college, then law school, paid for everything myself. And when Dad's hours were cut at the factory and Mom's medical bills started to pile up, I stepped in. They never asked, I just did it. Quietly. Month after month, I paid down their mortgage, kept the lights on, covered repairs when the roof leaked or the HVAC gave out. It wasn't charity, and I never saw it as a sacrifice. It was family. And I believed that one day when things settled, we'd all sit around that table and know that we had held each other through the hard times. My younger sister, Rachel, had always been different. Lighter, somehow cheerful, polished, always someone's favorite. While I buried myself in work and responsibilities, she floated through college with a communications degree, joined a boutique marketing firm, and met Jackson, her fiancé, at a holiday mixer. He came from money. His parents hosted fundraisers and lived in a glass house that overlooked the lake. They got engaged after 6 months, and before I knew it, I was standing next to Merrick, my husband, outside a vineyard that cost more than my entire education. We were early. Merrick reached into his jacket and pulled out the card we'd tucked a check inside for $10,000. That plus nearly a third of the wedding expenses, which we'd quietly chipped in on when Rachel said the budget was tight. We did it because it was family, because she was my sister, because Mom said it would mean the world. The ceremony was beautiful. Golden light falling over the hills, fairy lights strung through the trees, waiters with linen napkins and champagne. I found our names on the seating chart, Lauren Whitfield. Spelled right, which was rare, but when we reached the table, it was tucked near the back by the bar. None of my family was nearby, just tech friends from Jackson's startup, and a couple of guests I didn't recognize. I told Merrick it was fine. I didn't want to make a fuss. Dinner passed in a blur. Toasts, laughter, silverware tapping against glass. Then Mom tapped her wine glass, and called the room to attention. Dad stood beside her, beaming. I turned something in me tightening. They talked about Rachel's warmth, her light, how proud they were of the woman she'd become. Then Mom reached into her purse and pulled out an envelope. We wanted to give Rachel and Jackson something meaningful to start their journey, she said. We're gifting them the house, our family home. There was applause, a few gasps. Someone actually wiped away a tear. I didn't move. Not a word about me, not a mention. Just a key held up like a trophy, like the last 7 years hadn't happened, like my name wasn't still on the escrow account, like the house hadn't been mine in every way but the title. Rachel cried. Jackson hugged them. I sat there staring at the table, hands folded in my lap. Merrick didn't say anything. He just placed a hand on my knee. I'm okay, I whispered. Don't. But I wasn't. And as I watched them pose with the house key, holding it up like it was some symbol of legacy, I understood exactly where I stood in my own family. The drive home after the wedding was quiet. Merrick kept one hand on the wheel, the other resting gently on the console between us. I stared out the window, watching the trees blur past golden leaves catching the late sun. When we got back to our apartment, I stepped out of my shoes, hung up my dress, and sat down on the edge of the bed. Merrick stood in the doorway waiting, but I just shook my head. "I'm fine," I said. He didn't push. The next few days moved like fog. I went through my usual work routines, client calls, spreadsheets, tax files, but my thoughts kept drifting. I kept seeing my mother's hands holding that key, hearing the applause, watching my sister's face as she clutched their gift. I hadn't even been mentioned. Not once. Then on Wednesday, an envelope arrived, pale pink, tucked in with a stack of bills. Merrick handed it to me on his way out the door. "Looks like a thank you note," he said. I stared at the cursive writing across the front, Merrick Whitfield and guest. I opened it. The card was heavy, embossed with gold script. Inside, a short message in Rachel's bubbly handwriting. "Thank you so much for your generous gift and for helping make our wedding so magical. We'll always remember your kindness. Love, Rachel and Jackson. No mention of me. My name wasn't anywhere." I read it twice slowly, then dropped it into the trash. Later that night, I sat at the kitchen table with a glass of water staring at the fridge magnets. Merrick leaned against the counter behind me, arms crossed. "You okay?" I gave him a look. He nodded. "You don't want to hear it, but maybe it's time to stop making excuses for them." I didn't say anything. "You've done more for them than most people would. You paid their mortgage. You showed up every holiday, even when they forgot your birthday. And they act like you're some distant cousin dropping in." I opened my mouth, but the words caught. "They mean well." I started, then stopped. It didn't feel true. Not anymore. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling fan, listening to its slow, steady turn. I kept thinking back: graduation, the job offers, the years I'd sent checks without asking for anything in return. When I finished law school, they gave me a $50 check and a card that said, "So proud." When Rachel graduated, they gave her a new car and threw a party at the lake. I had told myself things were different then. Maybe money was tighter. Maybe they'd caught a windfall later. I wanted to believe that. But it didn't explain the way they looked at her, or the way they looked through me. By Friday, I was back in the office early, hoping work would quiet the noise in my head. It didn't. Around mid-morning, I was sitting across from a client, a local business owner going through a standard tax review. "If I paid half the mortgage for the last 5 years," he said, "but the deed's in her name, do I get anything back? If we split?" I hesitated, pen in hand. "If it's not in your name," I said slowly, "then legally." "It's complicated." My own words sat heavy in the air. 7 years. 7 years of checks, transfers, repairs, insurance. Never once had I asked to be added to the title. I just assumed they knew, that they'd remember, that it meant something. Back at my desk, I logged into the real estate database. It took less than 5 minutes. The house was never in my name, not even jointly. The title had always stayed with my parents, Walter and Marlene Whitfield, and just a week ago, it had officially been transferred to Rachel and Jackson Wells. Notarized, recorded, final. I sat there not moving, then pulled out a sticky note and wrote it down. I wasn't part of the gift because I was the one who paid for it. That night, my phone rang. My mother's name lit up the screen. I already knew it wouldn't be an apology. "Hi, sweetheart," she said. Her voice was cheerful. "It's been too long. Rachel and Jackson just got back from Bora Bora. We're having dinner this Saturday, just the 6 of us. You and Merrick should come." I waited a beat. "Dinner?" I asked. "We'll make that rosemary pot roast you love. Come around 5. I said yes. I don't know why. Maybe I wanted an explanation. Maybe I thought it would be different. That they'd acknowledge something, anything. But I should have known better. Saturday came with a damp chill. The trees were starting to turn, and the air had that edge to it, early fall in the mountains. Merrick and I drove in silence until we reached the turnoff. Their house, or rather Rachel's house, now looked familiar and completely different. New curtains in the window, a new doormat, her running shoes lined up by the door. I paused on the porch. The brass knocker I used to polish every Thanksgiving was still there. Inside, the smell hit first vanilla, not cinnamon like Mom always used to burn. The furniture had been rearranged. My dad's old recliner was gone. The dining table was set, dinner already served. "You look tired, honey," my mom said, kissing my cheek. "Working too much." Rachel beamed from her seat, radiant in a cream sweater. Jackson gave a half nod. Merrick and I sat in the only two seats left. One of them used to be my father's. I picked at my plate, waiting. It didn't take long. "Well," my mom said, placing her fork down gently, "now that Rachel and Jackson have their own space, your father and I have been thinking—" My stomach tightened. Dad spoke next. "We'd like to move into your cottage, the one up in Fairview. It's perfect for us, quiet, close to church." I blinked. "You want to move into my home?" "Well, it's not like you use it full time," my mom said, smiling too brightly. Rachel added, "You and Merrick could just live together, couldn't you?" Merrick's jaw tensed. I looked around the table, my mother's hopeful expression, my father's casual nod, Rachel's half smile. I understood then. This wasn't about dinner. It wasn't about peace. It was about the next thing they wanted. I set my fork down slowly. "Let me get this straight. You gave away the house I paid the mortgage on for 7 years, and now you want to move into the one I actually own." "Lauren," my mom said, "don't be so harsh. We're not taking it, just living there. You didn't even ask. You decided. Like always." "You're being dramatic," my dad muttered. "No," I said, my voice steady. "I'm finally being honest." Rachel slammed her fork down. "You've always been jealous. You never liked it when I got more attention. That's why they love me more. I never made them feel guilty for it." I stared at her, then looked back at my parents. No one denied it. Merrick reached under the table and took my hand. I stood. "If they love you so much, maybe they can live with you." No one moved to stop me. As I shut the door behind me, I didn't feel guilty. I felt awake. The night after that dinner, I didn't sleep much. I moved through the apartment on autopilot, putting away dishes, folding the throw blanket, checking the locks, even though Merrick already had. The quiet felt heavier than usual. But I didn't feel sorry. I didn't feel angry either. Just a strange kind of stillness. I'd said what I needed to say. The next few days, I buried myself in work. Tax prep quarterly reviews, a small bakery I'd just taken on as a new client. I liked the routine. It gave my hands something to do, even if my mind wasn't always in it. I was halfway through updating a spreadsheet when my phone buzzed. "Motion detected at your property." I stared at the notification. It was the Brevard cabin. Seconds later, another alert came through, a call from a number I didn't recognize. "This is Dana with Carolina Watchdog Security. Are you the homeowner of 417 Orchard Trail?" "I am," I said, already standing. We had a motion alert at that location. 2 individuals entered using a key. Their names match a Ronald and Marlene Whitfield. "Can you confirm authorization?" I pressed the phone tighter to my ear. That key was not given for that purpose. "Would you like us to alert local law enforcement?" "Yes," I said without hesitation. "I want them removed." When I hung up, Merrick was standing in the doorway. "What happened?" "They're in the house," I said. "The Brevard house." He blinked. "They used a key." I nodded. We were on the road within 15 minutes. The trees were starting to turn red at the tips, gold around the edges, but I hardly noticed. My thoughts raced. Birthdays skipped, dinners where my name never came up. And that night at the wedding, the key held up like a trophy. We pulled up just past noon. The gravel crunched under the tires as we reached the front of the cabin. There they were, my parents sitting on the porch beside a pile of bins and a home goods bag. My mom sipped from a travel mug like she was waiting for a friend. My dad stood as we stepped out as if nothing was out of the ordinary. "There you are," he said. "We figured you'd come around." I didn't answer. I walked past him and toward the deputy already parked nearby. He looked up as I approached. "They don't have permission to be here," I told him. My mother stood quickly. "What are you doing?" Her voice was sharp, surprised. "After everything we've done for you, how can you be so ungrateful?" "Ungrateful," I repeated. "You handed away the house I paid for. Now you think you're entitled to this one?" "It's just temporary," my dad said. "We assumed. That's your problem. You assume. You never ask." "Kaylin, we're your parents," my mom said. "We raised you. We supported you." I looked at them. "What exactly did you support?" They didn't answer. The deputy spoke next. "Do you want to press charges, ma'am?" My father's expression changed. "Don't do this." I looked at the bags, the porch swing I'd installed the summer after I got the cabin. I looked at the two people who had taken everything I gave and called it theirs. "No," I said, "no charges, but I want them off the property today." The deputy nodded. "We'll escort them to the station. Standard for trespass mediation." My mother's voice cracked. "You're sending us to jail. Maybe sitting still will help you think," I said quietly. They didn't argue. They didn't beg. They just watched as the officer opened the cruiser door. Merrick loaded their bins into our car, and we drove them to a small storage unit just off the highway. I prepaid for a month. That was more than enough. When we got home that afternoon, I dropped the keys on the table and sat down. The deed for the Brevard house was still there right under a stack of electric bills. I picked it up, ran my fingers across the embossed seal, and whispered to myself, "I've paid for everything," then paused, "except peace." That night I lay in bed with the ceiling fan spinning above me, the room dim and quiet. I kept seeing their faces as the squad car pulled away, hearing the clink of my mom's mug on the porch step. I didn't sleep. 3 days later, my phone wouldn't stop vibrating. I woke to 17 missed calls, 14 voicemails, and more text messages than I could count. Cousins, aunts, even an old neighbor from 3 streets over. And then I saw it, a Facebook post. It was my mother. Her profile picture was cropped from the wedding, her and Rachel arms linked. The caption read, "In our golden years, we've been cast out by our own daughter, treated like criminals. All we ever did was love her." Attached were 2 photos, one of them sitting on my porch steps hunched beside their suitcases, another of the officer's cruiser in the background. The comments came fast, people calling me heartless, saying kids today had no soul. A family friend wrote my son would never do this to us. An aunt added, "This is what happens when you marry someone who wants to isolate you." I didn't respond. I didn't even scroll. I just sat there, phone in hand. Then the private messages started. My Aunt Priscilla. "Your mom is devastated. She says you won't even let them stay in the little cottage. Isn't that the one you never use? A childhood friend. I don't know what's going on with you and your parents, but I miss the old Kaylin, the one who always put family first." Someone else wrote, "You really think a house matters more than your own parents? Shame." I thought about typing, about explaining, about attaching the mortgage records, the payment history, the repairs, the deeds. Instead, I turned the phone over and set it face down. Merrick was already in the kitchen, scrambled eggs on the stove, his sleeves rolled up. He looked at me once and knew. "You saw it," he said. I nodded. He walked over, opened the drawer beside the fridge, and took out a slim manila folder. He laid it on the counter. Inside were copies of my old emails, payment records, tax documents, everything I'd ever sent, saved, or signed. "I've been keeping them," he said, "in case you ever needed to remember what's real." Later that day, I walked into the office and passed by the glass conference room. Emily, one of our interns, was being scolded by a senior partner. She stood still, hands behind her back, not arguing, not interrupting, just absorbing. I saw a flash of myself in her posture. Years ago, always accommodating, always the one who stepped aside, made room, let others decide. That evening, I made tea and sat down at the dining table. Merrick was grading student papers across from me. I opened my laptop. Not Facebook Word. Typed. Deleted. Typed again. By midnight, I had over a dozen paragraphs. I didn't rant. I didn't accuse. I told the story exactly as it happened. The mortgage, the repairs, the years I sent money without being asked. I ended with a single line. "If you want the truth, I'll tell it, but be ready for it." I stared at the blinking cursor, then saved the file. I didn't post the story that night. I saved the file and closed the laptop, then sat in the stillness for a long time. The lights were low. Merrick had already gone to bed, and the only sound in the apartment was the hum of the refrigerator. I made another cup of tea and drank it slowly. Something in me had shifted, but I couldn't name it yet. By morning, the sky was clouded over. Rain tapped against the window, soft and steady. I stayed in my robe and read through the file again. It was all there, the payments, the repairs, the years I kept things afloat while everyone else seemed to drift freely. I hadn't exaggerated or embellished. I'd just written what happened. I hit post before I had time to second guess. The responses came in slowly at first. A few coworkers messaged me, then old classmates, then extended relatives I hadn't spoken to in years. A cousin wrote, "I didn't know you paid for the house. That changes everything." People who'd once commented under my mother's post began to quietly delete their remarks. Others sent private apologies. No one from my immediate family said a word. I was halfway through my second cup of coffee when the email came in. The sender was Gregory Bell. The name rang a bell, but it took me a second to place it. He was the estate attorney my parents used years ago, the same one who handled my grandfather's affairs. His message was direct. "Ms. Whitfield, I came across your recent post and believe there's something you should be aware of. In 2016, your parents initiated a draft to transfer ownership of their primary residence into your name. The process was never finalized. In 2018, the deed was reassigned to another beneficiary, your sister. No legal notice was required at the time due to joint parental ownership." I read that paragraph 5 times. They had meant to give it to me once, then changed their minds, quietly, no conversation, no explanation, just a shift on paper. I stared at the wall for a while, then opened a new browser tab and searched the county records database. Just a hunch. When I pulled up the Brevard cabin there, it was a title search logged under my mother's name dated 2 weeks ago. They'd already checked, probably weighing their chances, seeing if they could try again. I stood up and walked to the hallway closet. There was a black accordion file in the back, label smudged but still legible, Mortgage 2017 to 2024. Inside were copies of every major transaction, the loan agreement, the transfer history, the tax assessments. I laid them out on the dining table sheet by sheet in order, each one a moment I had kept us afloat without a word of thanks. By late afternoon, I had scanned everything and organized it into folders on my laptop. That night, I started a second post. No emotions this time, no story, just the numbers. I uploaded screenshots of bank transfers labeled by year, attached the full PDF of the mortgage agreement, added the title log showing the inquiry into my vacation property. I ended with one line. "For years I paid in silence. Now I present the math." I hovered over the button ready to post when Merrick walked through the door with 2 grocery bags in hand. He set them down, pulled out his phone, and crossed the room. "There's something you need to hear," he said. He scrolled to a voice recording, handed me the phone, and stepped back. The timestamp was from 6 months earlier. I remembered the weekend he'd stepped out to call my mother after she left a long, rambling voicemail about some upcoming family plans. Now I heard her voice clearly. Kaylin's always been the workhorse. That's her role. Rachel deserves comfort. She's had a harder time emotionally, you know that. I didn't say anything. Merrick sat down beside me. "We can use that," he said. I nodded. The next morning I uploaded the post. This time everything was included. Screenshots, payment records, mortgage PDFs, the title search inquiry, and at the bottom the audio clip. I added a final caption. "This isn't revenge, this is clarity. I won't be rewritten." Within hours, the post had spread. Messages poured in, some from people I barely knew, thanking me for putting truth into words they never had the chance to say. Others were strangers who shared stories of being erased in their own families. A few tried to defend my parents and sister until they heard the clip. I didn't respond to any of it. I just let it sit. That evening, Rachel posted a screenshot of my post. Her caption read, "We never wanted this to go public, but if you want public, fine. Let's talk legal." My mother commented right below it, "She'll regret this." I put the phone down and smiled, because by then I already had the final piece they didn't know about. The next morning, just after 9, I got an email from Gregory Bell. The subject line was short, "Delivered." The cease and desist letter had gone out by courier and by email. It was addressed formally to Rachel Wells and outlined 3 clear terms: immediate removal of all social media content referencing the Brevard property, return of all physical and digital copies of the house key, and a legal warning regarding the fraudulent title inquiry. The last paragraph read, "Should any further attempts at misrepresentation or possession be made, the undersigned reserves the right to pursue damages and full injunctive relief under state and federal law." Attached were scanned PDFs, evidence that Rachel and my mother had accessed mortgage files using outdated personal information, attempting to start a title transfer without my knowledge. I closed the laptop and leaned back. No more guessing, no more wondering. They had tried to take something I built twice. By noon, the family group chat had turned into something else entirely. It started with a message from my Aunt Darlene, just a screenshot of my post, followed by a second one showing the cease and desist letter. "Is this true?" she asked. A few minutes later, Uncle Ray replied, "Kaylin did what she had to. Proud of her for standing up." Rachel left the chat without saying anything. My mother stayed silent for a while, then sent a voice memo. Her voice was shaky, full of long pauses. "I did it for the family," she said, "for the image, for you girls to stay close. If we look like we're struggling, people talk. If Rachel looks like she's lacking, she spirals. I thought we were doing what was best." I didn't reply. I let it sit, the same way they had let everything sit for years. That evening my phone rang. The name on the screen glowed in the dim light. "Rachel." I picked up. "You really want to drag our family name through court?" she asked, skipping any greeting. "It's already there," I said. "I'm just finally in the room." There was a pause on the line, long enough for me to hear her breathing. "You're choosing property over people, Kaylin." "No," I said, calm and steady. "I'm choosing peace over manipulation." Another pause. Then she hung up. The next day at work, we had a lunch meeting for the new intern project. Nothing formal: paper plates, a crock pot of chili, and someone's homemade cookies. I was pouring coffee when the intern Emily handed me a napkin with a little tag taped to it. My name was written neatly across it. Kaylin, spelled correctly. Not misspelled, not skipped, just there. I folded the napkin and tucked it into my bag. That night, Gregory sent another email. A short update. My parents had moved into a small retirement apartment in Hendersonville, month-to-month lease 1 bedroom. There was no note, no challenge, just quiet. Rachel hadn't posted anything since the letter went out. No photos, no updates, nothing from the lake house. I didn't need a public apology. I didn't need to win. The silence was enough. The final voicemail came that night. I had just sat down on the couch when I saw it, one missed call. One message. It was my mother. "Kaylin, we need to talk. We know we messed up. Please, just talk to us." I deleted it. Not because I was angry, but because I no longer needed to hold on to it. In the weeks that followed, things didn't become dramatic or chaotic. If anything, they softened. I went back to work. Merrick and I made dinner most nights, simple meals, chicken stir-fry or baked pasta. Sometimes we watched documentaries. Sometimes we just sat on the couch and read. On a crisp Saturday morning, I drove out to the cabin. It looked different now. The front porch had a welcome mat I didn't recognize, and there was a potted fern by the door. June. The woman renting it short-term met me with a kind smile. She showed me around. A few of her things were scattered here and there, books on the coffee table, a typewriter by the window, a throw blanket draped over the arm of the couch. In the kitchen, she paused at a drawer and pulled out a linen napkin. "These are handmade, aren't they?" she asked. "They were a gift," I said. "I left them behind once. Now they stay." She folded the napkin carefully and smiled. "It feels like someone really lived here." I nodded. They did. The following week, an email from Rachel landed in my inbox. Subject line, "Clearing the air." The message was short. A few stiff paragraphs about how things had unfolded with no direct apology. Just a vague mention of wanting to preserve peace. The next day, a bouquet of lilies arrived at my office. No card. I turned to the receptionist. "They're not for me," I said. "You can keep them." She blinked. "Are you sure they're beautiful?" "They're not mine to keep," I said. "They're someone else's performance." She took them. I went back to my desk. A few days later, I had coffee with Lorraine, a longtime client and retired literature professor. We were sitting near the window of a quiet cafe, steam rising from our mugs. She looked at me across the table and said, "You always did your job quietly, Kaylin. But I've watched you. You never let them erase you." I didn't say much, just nodded, swallowing the weight in my throat. As I walked back to my car, I passed a storefront window. Rain streaked the glass. I saw my reflection hair pulled back, eyes steadier than they'd been in months. Not a villain, not a victim. Just me. The following Friday started like most others. I got up early, pulled my hair back, packed a lunch I'd probably forget to eat, and walked into the office just before 8. The light was still soft outside, and the building was quiet except for a janitor humming down the hall. I liked getting there before the day picked up, before the phones rang, before the inbox filled. I sat at my desk and opened my laptop. The cease and desist letter had been delivered 3 days ago, and I hadn't heard a word since. I opened my inbox. One unread message from Gregory Bell. No greeting this time. Just an attachment and a brief line above it. As discussed, attached is the scanned letter we finalized along with supplemental documentation. I clicked the file. It was all there. Gregory had sent a final version of the cease and desist sent by both certified mail and email to Rachel and my mother. It restated the key terms: immediate removal of any social media content referencing the Brevard property, full return of all house keys, and a legal warning regarding the attempted title fraud. Attached were supporting documents, proof that my mortgage records had been accessed without permission, and the date-stamped search inquiry on the cabin's deed. The last paragraph was written in plain, cold language. If they tried again, we'd pursue damages and full injunctive relief. I sat with that for a while. Then I stood up and walked to the kitchenette. Emily, the intern, was there, rinsing out her travel mug. She gave me a small smile and stepped aside so I could fill the kettle. We didn't say much, just moved around each other quietly. Back at my desk, I opened my phone. Nothing from my parents, nothing from Rachel. But I had a saved recording. One Merrick had sent me last week, though I hadn't done anything with it yet. I opened the audio file. It was dated 6 months earlier, right before the wedding. Merrick had called my mother after she left a voicemail that had gone on too long without saying anything specific. He'd put the call on speaker and recorded it after she started venting. Her voice played through the speakers in my phone, sharp but controlled. Kaylin's always been the workhorse. That's her role, she said. Rachel deserves comfort. She's had a harder time emotionally. You know that. That was the moment I made my decision. I opened a clean Word document and began a third post. No opening paragraph this time. No explanation. Just facts. I uploaded a sequence of screenshots, bank transfers arranged by year, followed by PDFs of the mortgage agreement, then title logs showing the search made in my mother's name. And finally, I embedded the audio file. At the bottom of the post, I typed one sentence. This isn't about revenge. This is about clarity. I will not be erased. Then I hit post. The reaction came quickly. Some of the same people who had rushed to defend Rachel now shared the post themselves. Others who had stayed quiet began reaching out. A woman I hadn't seen since high school messaged me privately. "Thank you for putting this out there," she wrote. "So many of us stay quiet. We shouldn't have to." I didn't reply to most of the messages. I didn't need to. The truth had its own rhythm now, its own volume. By evening, Rachel finally responded. She posted a screenshot of my post and added a caption, "We didn't want to go public, but if Kaylin wants to take this route, we're ready to speak legally." My mother commented right under it, "She'll regret this." I put my phone down and turned off the lamp. That same night, Merrick came home carrying a takeout bag and a familiar look on his face, focused, but not hurried. He set the food down and handed me his phone. "Thought you might want to see this." Another recording. This one was from a family dinner the previous spring before everything unraveled. My mother's voice was softer this time, but the tone was the same. "She's responsible, sure, but she doesn't understand family the way Rachel does. Rachel brings everyone together. Kaylin's just efficient." I closed the audio file. I didn't need to hear the rest. Later that evening, I gathered all the scanned documents, mortgage records, screenshots, title searches, and organized them into a single folder on my desktop. I renamed it Final Cabin plus Primary Residence and backed it up on an external drive. Then I opened the window, let the breeze in, and sat on the couch with Merrick while he graded papers. Neither of us spoke for a while. At one point, he looked over and said, "You okay?" I nodded. "I just didn't think it would go this far." He leaned back. "They didn't think you'd hold the line." I didn't answer, but he wasn't wrong. The next morning, I woke early before the sun came up. I made coffee, pulled on a jacket, and stepped out onto the balcony. The air had that mid-fall chill to it, crisp but not bitter. I stood there for a long time watching the city shift from dark to light. My phone buzzed. Another notification. Rachel had deleted her latest post. My mother's comment was gone too. Their profiles had been scrubbed of anything tied to the cabin or the house. I closed the screen. The wind shifted slightly, carrying the scent of someone's fireplace from a few buildings over. I stayed there a little longer, letting the quiet settle in. Back inside, I made breakfast. Nothing fancy, scrambled eggs, toast sliced apples. Merrick wandered in with bed hair and sat down at the table. We ate in silence, just the clink of forks and the sound of the kettle finishing its boil. He looked over once and said, "They're unraveling." I just nodded. The weekend came and went without a word from them. No more Facebook posts, no more cousin group texts, no more sideways comments through distant relatives. Just quiet. By Monday morning, the silence had become its own kind of message. I checked my inbox as I sipped coffee at my desk. An email from Gregory Bell waited at the top of the list, short, just a sentence and a document attached. For your records, property access and title activity have ceased as of this morning. No further action taken by the involved parties. I downloaded the attachment, skimmed the notarized confirmation, and saved it to the same folder where I'd stored every screenshot, every receipt, every scanned document that had led to this moment. Later that afternoon, I received a second message, this one from a real estate contact Merrick and I knew from Asheville. A brief update. Just wanted to let you know your parents have signed a lease on a one-bedroom in Hendersonville. Month to month, no cosigner. I leaned back in my chair. No announcement, no confrontation, just a quiet retreat. Rachel's social feeds were next, all of them wiped clean. No lake house photos, no porch swing mornings, no mugs with sentimental quotes in pastel script. The posts where she'd called the cabin a second home were gone. No updates, no captions, nothing. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't need to. Sometimes justice doesn't arrive with a bang. It settles like dust after a storm, quiet, inevitable done. That night I sat at the kitchen table with a warm cup of tea, Merrick flipping through a magazine across from me. The apartment was still, peaceful. I opened the drawer in the hallway and pulled out a small wooden box I'd found years earlier at a flea market. Hand-carved with a brass latch that stuck sometimes. I opened it and placed the old house key inside the same one they once held up like a prize at Rachel's wedding, the same one they used to walk through my door without asking. I closed the lid gently and labeled the box with a strip of masking tape. Things I survived. The next morning, a voicemail arrived just before I left for work. It was my mother's voice. "Colin, we need to talk. Please. We know we made mistakes. Just please talk to us. I didn't save it. I didn't play it twice." I pressed delete and set the phone face down on the counter. Not because I wanted to forget, but because I no longer needed to carry it the way I used to. That afternoon, I walked down to the cafe on the corner. Lorraine was already there, stirring cream into her coffee eyes sharp behind her glasses. She waved me over and said, "You know, I've watched you for a long time. You don't say much, but you never let them erase you." I smiled and thanked her. It wasn't a dramatic moment. It didn't need to be. Some truths just land with more weight when they come from someone who doesn't hand out praise casually. On my way home, I stopped by the post office to drop off a rent check for the cabin's new tenant, June. She'd asked to extend her stay through spring. "It just feels settled here," she'd said in her last message, like someone poured care into every corner. That evening, I passed a storefront window streaked with light rain. My reflection stared back, calm hair, pulled into a low twist, eyes not tired, just clear, not a victim, not a villain, just someone who had finally stopped apologizing for existing. Back at the office the next day, I paused outside the break room. Emily, the intern, stood off to the side, while one of the partners took credit for a project she'd spent the last 2 weeks pulling together. She didn't argue, just nodded, hands behind her back. I stepped in quietly and waited until the partner left. Then I looked at her and said, "I saw the report. You did the work. Next time you bring it to the meeting yourself." Her eyes widened, unsure how to respond. I smiled once. "Speak early. It saves years." She nodded, slow but sure. I returned to my desk and opened my calendar. The week was full, but the weight of it felt different now. It took time for the noise to die down completely. My parents didn't make another attempt to call. Rachel didn't post anything for months. Cousins who'd once asked for vacation weekends at the cabin now stayed quiet. The lake house went up for sale quietly in early summer. My name was never mentioned. The buyer was a couple from South Carolina who wanted a place to retire. They painted the shutters, removed the porch swing, and replaced the hydrangeas with ornamental grass. I didn't go see it. I didn't need to. By the time the leaves started to turn again, Merrick and I had hosted 2 dinners in the apartment, just a handful of friends, each time laughter filling the small space plates, passed hand to hand. There was a calm to it. Nothing showy, no comparisons, no long silences at the table, just people who wanted to be there. I spent a weekend reorganizing the little linen closet near the washer. At the bottom of a basket, I found one of the napkins from Rachel's wedding, the ones embroidered with our family name in gold thread. I held it for a moment, ran my thumb across the seam, and then folded it neatly into a donation bag. Some things I used to cling to because I thought they were part of me. Now I let them go because I finally knew they weren't. The new tenant at the cabin, June, sent me a note in early October, a handwritten thank you card. She said she'd taken up watercolors again and that the cabin had become a kind of sanctuary for her. She included a small print of a painting sunlight on the lake trees bending slightly in the breeze. She didn't know the story, but somehow she captured the stillness I'd once longed for. I framed it and hung it beside my desk. Rachel and I haven't spoken, not since that last phone call. And that's okay. Some distances aren't meant to be closed. Some boundaries aren't punishments, they're peace. I still see my mother's handwriting sometimes on old recipe cards on birthday envelopes from years back. And when I do, I feel something quiet inside me. Not anger, not sadness, just space. And in that space there's room for other things now, things I chose. Not what they handed me, not what they expected of me, but what I reached for when no one thought I would. In the end, it wasn't the paperwork or the letters that changed everything. It was choosing to stop explaining myself, to stop asking to be seen. I learned that justice doesn't always come with applause. Sometimes it arrives in the form of silence, a cleared-out group chat, a voicemail you don't return, a cabin key dropped into a drawer labeled closed. And that's enough. Thanks for staying with me to the end. If this story reminded you of your own strength or someone you used to be, I'd love for you to share it or just leave a quiet note in the comments. And if you want more stories like this one, you're always welcome here.